that was stellar work. And if you go back and listen to Def Leppard's stuff from the 80s, it sounds very dated. It's stuck in the 80s. You go back and listen to Slang, and that record could be released today, and it would not sound dated at all. So, same thing with Cinderella. I saw them in 1997, 96 or 97, at the Vogue here in Indianapolis. And, of course, Still Climbing had only been out a year or so. Well, they came out and played an entire set, and the only song they did off that whole thing was Hot and Bothered, which actually was off of a movie soundtrack 2 years prior. So basically, they acted like that album never came out. And while they didn't apologize for it directly, they did by not playing it, if you know what I mean. So, bands need to understand that if you're going to do something different, you got to stick by it, unless it's just garbage. If it's garbage, just say it's garbage and move on. But I really don't feel like he feels that way. I feel like he was simply trying to justify why they made a record that was so different than anything else they've done before or since. And, I don't know. I just felt like he really needs to stand by that album. It's a great album. And if you've not heard Slang or you haven't heard it in a long time, go back and listen to it. What an awesome record.
Yeah, I think I need to do that, Biv, because you mentioned that you were a huge fan of Slang. And I'll be honest, you being a bit older than me, at that time I was in high school, if it gives you an idea how old I am. And, I was into metal a little bit, but I was into more of the Seattle grunge sound, you know what I mean? I was into Nirvana, I was into Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, that whole thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I get it. It really did change rock, hard rock, heavy metal forever. The 80s sound isn't something you can pull off at that time. So it just, the grunge sound, like it or not, and you can look back in history and go, man, that was awful. But it truly had a tremendous influence on rock music as a whole, to where I can understand why Vivian Campbell and the band felt the way they felt. They didn't come out and say, hey, listen, here is, Hysteria Part 2. They decided to do something entirely different. And this is a topic that's mentioned a lot of times on the show. We'll be mentioned on later on in the broadcast when we talk about Circus Maximus' new album. Where do you draw the line when it comes to pushing the envelope and doing something different without alienating your base? And that's a tough one to do. You look at what Def Leppard did. They made the calculated risk of making an album that didn't sound like it was stuck in the 80s to try to be able to compete with the Nirvana alternative-like sound, and it didn't do well at all. So, Vivian's going, hey, and a lot of old Def Leppard fans are like, screw that album. And then you have guys like Biv who are like, the album is great, what the hell are you talking about? But Biv's a different cat, because he listens to things and on their merit and goes, hey, this is good or this is bad, and I'm going to say what it is one way or the other. And I'm the same way. I'm not going to fault you for playing it safe, but I'm also not going to applaud you for doing something different if it sucks. But...
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. Exactly right. If it's a great record, it's a great record. Don't apologize for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's a lot of bands. I mean, let's face it, we can go down the list of bands that were like, what the hell are you guys doing? And many Def Leppard fans did that. You listen to their most recent stuff they have now. It's stuff that could have been released in the mid-'80s. And you go, wow, hey, it's Def Leppard. You can hear it within 5 seconds. You get it. And so I understand and based on album sales too, I can understand why they go, yeah, that didn't work so well. But for those who truly understand and appreciate good music, they really don't care that it wasn't a big album. You mentioned Cinderella's album, Still Climbing, that no one bought. Let's be honest. No one bought that freaking album. But Biv thinks it's one of the best albums they've ever done, and no one seems to care because they're not fashionable anymore. And that's a damn shame, especially at that period. And so I would challenge you, metalheads, to go back and listen to a lot of stuff that a lot of 80s bands released in the 90s that no one paid attention to and should have, because it was really good stuff. And sadly, it just fell on deaf ears because it wasn't, it wasn't covered in flannel, essentially.
Exactly. So, right about that same time is in 1997 is when Iced Earth came out with something Wicked This Way Comes, which is actually a CD, Jason, that you introduced me to. I don't know if you remember that or not. So anyway, you and I have both been fans now for a very, very long time of Iced Earth. And it was announced this past week that their new release, called The Judas Goat, will be released later this year. Now, we talked a few episodes ago about what our most anticipated release of the year might be. That is a candidate for me.
Really? Wow. Well, that's saying something, man, because when Dream Theater to me is the band that Biv, and if I'm saying this wrong, Biv, correct me, but Dream Theater was the band that Biv's like, dude, you really got to get into these guys. And I'm going, I don't see the big deal. And it took me years to get into them. You know what I mean? And I almost feel that Iced Earth is that band for you. You know what I mean? Like, I was a big Iced Earth fan when I met you, and you're like, yeah, they're okay, whatever. And then over time, you going, holy shit, these guys are really good.
I think that's fair. Back then, I compared everything to Dream Theater. Everything. If the vocals didn't sound clean like James LaBrie, I wouldn't listen to it. If the guitar wasn't crisp, I wouldn't listen to it. I just compared everything to that, and I was kind of I kind of trapped myself that way in the progressive metal genre. But since then, and you kind of helped bring me out of that. You introduced me to a lot of bands. Some I didn't like Circus Maximus, and some I did.
And Killswitch Engage.
And Killswitch, yeah, which I don't consider them progressive metal, but whatever. It is what it is. But I'm super excited about that coming out. And then the last thing I really wanted to touch on was, Jason, I can hear turtles everywhere crying out right now because Ed Force One was severely damaged in Santiago, Chile, this past week or so ago, and apparently will be out of commission for a while. So I really don't know what the Turtles are going to do.
Let me give you an update on that, Biv, in case you didn't see that come across the newswire. Turtles, hold on, everyone. I need you to shh. We need silence. Listen, put your ears up to your phone. Place your earbud into your ear a little bit more since you listen to the podcast. Shh. If you listen closely, you can hear Turtles rejoicing all over the world, folks, because Ed Force One is back in the air. It is fixed without a hiccup whatsoever. No delays in the tour. It's ready to go. And it was pretty amazing, Biv. I don't know if you saw that. I know that you're gonna touch on the damage that happened to the plane. The two engines they had to replace, the engines themselves cost $4 million apiece.
Chump change.
It's just amazing. It's like, oh, well, we got $8 million in the new engines we got to replace. Oh, well, we'll figure it out, It's amazing that they did that in the time frame they did. And Bruce actually had a post later on today where he was just like, it was just amazing what had to happen to make this happen without us missing any tour dates. I mean, just think about it. You have a plane of gear. The plane is grounded. You have shows throughout South America. You now need to figure out how to get all of your shit out of the plane into the shows around South America to eventually get back onto the plane once the plane's fixed and then fly to another part of the country or another part of the world. It's just amazing. I cannot wait, by the way, a couple weeks. I will give a report to all of you, according to metalheads that are listening to the podcast, as I will be attending the show at the United Center for Iron Maiden in a couple of weeks here, and I cannot wait listening to a lot of their stuff over the last couple of weeks just to kind of get anticipated, listening to the Book of Souls, because they have a lot of songs off that album, which is a great album. Biv disagrees, but Biv is a communist, and he doesn't know anything, and he also thought All Holy Grail was a 5 out of 5 album, so he clearly doesn't really understand metal and how to judge it very well. But I will say that I'm looking forward to seeing Ed Force One, hopefully myself, and great news story for Turtles and metalheads all around. Without any further ado, let's just get right into it. 5 reviews on this episode. Special guest joining us here in a bit to cover an album that I've been wanting to review for several months now, and let's just get into it. It's time for metal reviews.
It's time for new metal album reviews.
This time I'll go too far, go too long, gonna set the bar. I'm out the blood, I'm gonna silence the beast, 'cause I am Havoc, left behind my release.
That was beautiful, I'm sorry. That was Havoc from Circus Maximus's most recent album of the same name, Havoc. If you've listened to the show before, if you listened to the first episode of According to Metal, you heard that I'm a big Circus Maximus fan, and yet I heard that song and said, wow, Marilyn Manson is going through my headphones. What the hell's going on here? But no, that is really Circus Maximus, folks, and we're going to review that album here now. And we couldn't just do this review with me and Biv because we had to do it real proper-like. And I'm going to introduce to you not only a fan of the show for some reason, but the editor of LadyObscure.com. She's been with them 2 years. She's awesome. She is all things metal and a bag of chips. Our good friend Lacy Mucklow joining us here to do a proper review of Circus Maximus. And let's be honest, just add some class and credibility to this podcast. Lacy, welcome to According to Metal.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, Lacy. So you, of course, were one of the privileged and, lucky people to have this album weeks before I did. So you've got a chance to digest the most recent Circus Maximus album, Havoc. Again, we just played a snippet off of the album for everybody. I'm going to start with you, Lacy. Let's dish. Let's talk.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on this album?
I marinated on
you're
this
a
one
big
for
fan.
a while.
Go ahead.
For sure. And it grew on me a little bit, but my first impression was kind of, what are they doing? The more I listened to it, I realized that I really enjoyed the second half of the album more than the first half. I realized there was kind of a split there. And the first half seemed very experimental to me. Like you said, the title track, Havoc, when it first came out, prior to even when I got the promo, I was listening to that and I looked at my player to make sure the right song was up because it, like you said, it did not sound like them at all. It sounded like Marilyn Manson, pseudo-industrial metal, and they're a progressive metal band. So I wasn't really sure what was going on. They'd already released a couple of other singles before Havoc that were a little bit more in the vein of the normal Circus Maximus sound, but I didn't know what was going on with this Havoc stuff. So I finally listened to the whole album, and I was kind of mixed about everything. The previous 3 albums to me were pretty solid. Each one I loved for its various reasons. Each one was slightly different. The first 2 kind of were similar. 9 kind of diverged from that a little bit, but I still liked their sound. So I was kind of anticipating more of a 9 sound on this album because the way I felt is 9 was kind of they're settling into their trademark sound. The first 2 albums were a lot more Dream Theater influenced. And they have a different keyboard player starting with 9. So I thought, that's kind of, they're finding who they are. They've discovered their musical identity with their original music. And they've kind of streamlined a bit. They're not quite as epic as they were in the first 2. But, I like it. It's kind of cool. And I thought that's what they were going to pretty much stick with for this album. So I was really surprised when they started getting into, some more different and experimental styles on this one. And I don't feel it's as solid as the other 3.
I don't either, Lacy, and you touched on a lot of things that I actually was going to talk about it as well. I mean, Circus Maximus essentially started as a cover band of Dream Theater and Symphony X and stuff like that. So you can clearly hear in the first chapter and in Isolate, you hear those first 2 albums and you go, okay, definitely progressive metal, very heavy. There's a couple tracks that clearly are heavier than others, but you know it's metal. I mean, you definitely know it's progressive metal. You know what you're getting there. And then you heard 9, and I'll never forget this, because, of course, I was a Circus Maximus fan going into the album 9. Reach Within, if you remember, was the first single. Yep. It comes out, and you go, okay. A little softer than I'd like.